Hi, I'm Erin Birch. My clients call me the Body Whisperer. I have a background in physical therapy, yoga, and yoga therapy. But I have to say that my biggest impact, my biggest learning came from listening to my own body and crawling out of a hole of certain devastation with it. And so the things that I've learned from that are huge. And I'm talking to you today about posture. So posture is one of the more important things that we do, and yet it's one thing that sort of people think as a theoretical thing. What do I do with this body to make it really work? How do I deal with this body to make sure that I'm not in pain, that I'm not creating pain, that I'm being the best possible presentation of myself that I can? So posture is all of those things. It's everything that you do in every moment of every day, creating your future body. And when I work with people with this template, this posture that I'll be teaching you today, you can sense an immediate difference in their entire presence. There's way more flow, way more connection, way more aliveness, way more empowerment and invincibility. This is critical. The studies say that 93% of our communication is nonverbal. Well, you're telegraphing from your body all the time. So what you're not saying, your body is. We want to have your posture match your presence so that you're really in sync with yourself and everyone can feel it. Because we're picking up on these things all the time. You want a body that's going to last your entire life. You want to prevent future pain. And you know what? You want to prevent pain that you have right now. I had a doctor, a client of mine, who was standing with his feet wider than his hips, which we'll go over in this video. And when you stand with your feet wider than your hips, your structures aren't aligned, which we'll talk about in a minute. And he was having back pain, which stopped immediately when he brought his feet under his hips. When you ask a child to build a tower out of blocks, what they naturally do is they line them up, they stack them up like this, because this is actually the strongest configuration. This is sustainable. If these were the parts of your body, though, what I see people doing is this kind of thing. So it has to do with actually creating alignment, putting your parts of your body so that they stack neatly on top of each other. Now, one of the cues that our body is starting to experience discomfort is we start to shift positions. So I'm talking to people and they're shifting positions in front of me like this. And they're doing it fairly regularly. And when I'm standing, I'm just in my body like this, and it's just effortless for me to do that. And I have much more energy at the end of the day than if my body's having to work all the time, keeping me out of discomfort. I'm not creating it. So this is really powerful stuff. So I'd like to introduce to you my friend Susan Kirby. We met at a speaker training, and she's going to be my test person today to demonstrate the power of Invincible Posture. She has a powerful presence on stage. She's a speaker. She works with speakers. She's got a powerful presence on stage. And yet, the way that she was standing, there was a dissonance. Like her presence and her posture were apart. And so, part of what I wanted to do today and with you is show you how you can get from that place to the place of alignment with it. That your presence is really speaking through your body and not over it. So, thank you for being here today. I love that we're going to be talking about posture and presence. It's one of my favorite things.
Can I share one thing?
Sure.
So growing up, my mother always kind of modeled posture. If not the right way, but like her posture was like this and my curve was like that, and I just thought that was the way my body was. So I knew I was like that, but I didn't know it could be different. And I know you and I have done some work, so I'm always proud of it. It's better. But then I watch the video and I still go, I need more help with Erin. So I'm really grateful to be here.
Good. Stand the way that you used to stand before we started working together.
Okay. I think it was more like that.
Yeah. And so one of the things you may notice as an observer is that there's a lot of tension around here. And it actually looks almost like that part of her body is accentuated a little bit. So just kind of take note of where we're starting here. And we're going to start from the feet and work our way up, looking at each moving piece and integrating that into what we've done with the piece before. And if you'll just notice what's going on with Susan's feet right now, first of all, her weight is over on her left side. That was her habit. And her right foot is out a little bit. And I can, so I'm just going to come down here and we're going to work with what her foot configuration is. Now, I spoke a little bit before about how your feet need to be under your hips. Now, let me make a point about that right now. That your hips, if I said put your hands on your hips, you all would put your hands right here. That actually is not your hips. This is your pelvis. Your hips, there's a bone that sticks out here, and then there's the pubic bone, and the hips are sort of in the middle right here, bisecting that line. So your hips, if you were to draw a line down here, your second toe should be on that line. There. And same thing with this. Yep, yeah, that's good. So it's way narrower than people think when they hear the words hip width. And they want to be parallel. So the line of the foot really wants to follow that parallel configuration. Now, why is this important? Well, when I see people with their feet out like this, I have to ask myself, why are their feet pointing in a different direction than they're walking? So there's a dissonance there with that. So you want your feet actually to be pointing in the same direction that you're walking and creating alignment that way, because remember, alignment is your very strongest configuration. The second piece that we're going to do, I'm going to introduce it to you, and if it's easy for you, then by all means go ahead, but I want you to have the benefit of hearing it. This is a fairly sophisticated thing. When we were kids, I don't know about you, but we did this horrible thing that twisted the arm in one way and the other way like that. And this is an example, not a very nice one, but it's an example of what I call opposition. In other words, one forces are going in one direction and then forces are going in another direction, and it's sort of at a meeting point. Now we're going to do that right at the ankle-foot juncture. So I'm going to ask for an opposition here, lifting the arch. So just imagine that you could lift the arches a little bit. Instead of using your toes to do it, see if you can lift from up here. So you're actually, if you were a puppet and you were pulling this string to lift the arches, relaxing the toes, just lifting the arches from there. There, relaxing the toes while you do it. There you go. So that's step one, is just to lift the arches. We're going to combine that with another movement, but we're going to practice the other movement first, so you can relax that. Now the other movement is taking place right at the ankles. So you have an inner ankle bone right here on both feet, and you want to imagine that you can actually turn that inner ankle bone so that it's more facing behind you. That's it. When you roll the ankle bone in, Susan actually brings her hip with it. We don't really want that, so we want to create a way for this not to come along necessarily for the ride, although it will to some degree. So one strategy when this happens is to actually create another opposition. So if this was rolling in and this was rolling out, you're asking the separate bones to actually work differently. So now we're going to combine those two, the lift and the roll. So start with the lifting of the arches, and then on this side you want to just be mindful of that other derotation, that other opposition, and roll your ankles in and relax the toes. If the toes are starting to be part of this situation, then imagine that here, if this is your foot, there's the arch right underneath the base of the toes. Imagine that somebody is coming under there and just stretching out that area. And that feels like it relieves the toe tension. Yeah. So that's step two. Step one is parallel and hip width. Step 2, if you can, and play around with this, let it be a playful game, is that lift and roll. And break it down so that you're just lifting and then just rolling, and then play around with what would it feel like if you could combine those two actions. Okay, so now you can see that your knees are sort of doing a cross-eyed thing. If I were to take your kneecaps and draw a line, they're not pointing straight ahead.
Right.
So they're following that ankle rotation. But also, when the knees tend to point in, what that tells me from working with bodies for 35 years is that your inner thighs are really active right now.
Oh, yes.
So the inner thighs, what they tend to do in the standing position is sort of turn those knees in. So we're going to take care of that in a minute. So we're not going to worry about the knees quite yet, but we're going to come back to them. All right, so now we come to the hips. And the hips are, the hip joint is like a ball in a socket. This is kind of how the hips are. And I want you to imagine your hips sitting right there. And imagine that if the ball of your hip joint could press into the back part of the socket, it sort of shifts where your hips are. And it shifts the whole thing here. Good. Now, you can see that there's a big difference right now in terms of how Susan is accumulating her tension down here. It's shifted quite a bit. So also, you want to separate out the parts, right? There's a lot of moving parts, and we've sort of, the way that we've dealt with them a lot is to kind of glue them together. But the body doesn't work very well when it's glued together. So separate out the hips from the pelvis in your mind's eye. Awesome. That looks way different.
Okay.
All right, now, the place where we hold tension, it's different for everyone. Everyone's got their own secret sauce for how they hold tension in their bodies. Turns out that there's actually structures that hold tension really well and allow the rest of our body to move really well. So if you can take this area above the pubic bone and kind of draw in right there, good, and hold that. And I know that feels a little weird at first, but this is something that you can cultivate, is to draw in right here. No, don't tuck your pelvis when you do that. Some people have it sort of glued together that when they draw in, they automatically tilt their pelvis. I've seen this a lot. But instead, separate them out. They're two different events. So lift your tailbone, let the pelvis float over the hips, draw this in. Awesome. Really, it's feeling so different. Like the tension that you're having in this area is so different. It's softer here. And so when you press the ball of the hip joint into the back part of the socket, what you do is you activate your gluteus maximus, which is a really powerful, strong muscle. And it's not a bad muscle to sort of help you stand up. It's designed to do that. And with the tension here in the lower abdomen, this is what the Pilates teachers all talk about. This is what you want to cultivate. It's a kind of a soft holder. And so now it's holding you up. And so the usual suspects that you have down here don't have to work. And that's really key, is that you're redistributing the tension into places that are, strange as it may seem, designed to hold it. And then we're in another part here that's designed to hold tension, and that's to kind of draw your ribs together. Our ribs are right here, and so when you draw them together, it helps to support your whole shoulder girdle and your neck. And now the tension here has some place to go as well. Yeah. So you're placing your ribs right over your pelvis. A lot of times I'll see a lot of people who their ribs will be forward or they'll be back of their pelvis. And so you want to watch in a mirror at home when you're doing this. Look and see where your ribs are sitting over your pelvis. And it might seem a little weird to think that you could actually move your rib cage. But the thing is that you can. And the more you engage these muscles here and here, the more command you have over these moving parts. As you're anchoring your rib cage down, we're going to take a look at, here's the collarbones right here. And instead of just pulling the shoulders back, which is artificial and not very sustainable, and it does very unfortunate things to the shoulder joint. We're going to be just sort of doing a ninja trick for getting the shoulder blades to come together. So again, when you're at home, I want you to play around with this. Don't make this very serious. This is obviously a serious subject, but let yourself be playful with the different parts of your body. Yeah. So as you're anchoring here, here's your collarbones. If you were to shorten your collarbones, they'd go in this direction. But if your collarbones were to lengthen, they would go in that direction without you pulling the shoulders back with the muscles behind the shoulders. But notice now, come over your feet just a little bit, notice how powerfully integrated that feels. Mm-hmm. Like there's nothing that's waffly about that. And that's like those blocks, stacking up those blocks just feels that that alignment is strong configuration. At the same time, there's a little bit of spring, but there's no structure that sort of collapses under that. Now just hold and notice that I can't push you over. Now, if you don't mind, go back to the way that you were standing when we met.
Oh, it's hard to even get there now.
Okay. Well, put your weight evenly on both feet if you can. But when I do this, you can feel that the structure is not very strong. You waffle. If you were a building, there would be
earthquake damage.
There would be damage, yes. And I can push you over pretty easily. So go ahead and stand the way that you used to stand.
Just feels awkward. I think it was something more like this.
Now that we've been standing in the other way, the contrast is even more. All right, so we're going to build the posture once again from the ground up, and just to give you an idea of what it looks like from the side. So start with your feet parallel in hip width, and here's your hips right here. Right? Mm-hmm. And then the lift and roll, the opposition at the ankles, the feet and ankles, relaxing the toes, relaxing the toes. Nice. Okay. Now the knees are still going in, but we're going to take care of that when we redistribute the tension. So come over your feet too. Like you actually, if you can see your feet when you look down, you're not over them.
Don't see them now.
Good.
Okay.
Because normally, that's how, right?
Yeah,
that's how you are.
You
got to
see your feet. See if there are feet there.
Yeah. I trust that there are feet there.
There are. Okay.
Right. All right. So then you're going to take the hip joint and you're going to press the ball into the back part of the socket and you're going to lift your tailbone. Right. And easy in those ankles. Good. And then draw in here above the pubic bone. And you'll notice if you really take the tension out of these thighs. And put it into here, okay. Then your knees start going straight.
Okay.
Yeah, way better. Now lift your tailbone a little bit more, and that's going to feel a little uncomfortable because you've spent a lot of years the other way. So lift the tailbone, and that's okay. To challenge that discomfort is really okay.
And it's lifting it by pushing the balls into the back socket.
That's one way to do it. You can also do it separately, but yeah, you can. Yeah. And so now anchor your rib cage here. There we go. Nice. And then lengthen the collarbones, and I'll show you what that looks like also from behind. Nice. And now your head wants to just sit there. It's almost nothing to do with the head and neck because you've created the stage for them to actually just hang out above the shoulders, and they have support from here and from here. And now when I feel this, it's not even the same body. It's not even the same body. So you're not actively working on your dowager's hump. You're actually creating a cervical spine that feels good. There's space, there's springiness. And so again, this feels really solid and I can't push you around. All right, so Susan, if you'd go back into your old posture just for a moment, and there's hardness in this tissue. It feels unrelenting. It feels like I can feel these bones are under stress. There's a lot of tension happening through here. It doesn't feel good. So now go back into building the new posture as best as you can in these short moments. Lift the tailbone. There we go. Lift, lift. Good. And anchor. And now when lifting when lengthening the collarbones, you can see that it comes from here, which creates a beautiful line, and there's softness and give in all of these tissues that wasn't there before. Let's have you relax for a moment and then just pull your shoulders back the way that we all sort of think that it's a good idea to do. And what happens is you can see that this is where the tension is coming from, and there's a disconnection to the neck. It's like the neck doesn't have any way to relate to this at all. You're just sort of stuck. But when you relax, anchor in the rib cage, lengthen the collarbones, now there's a sense of flow and connection with the neck. It makes sense to these moving parts to be related in this way. So this is the way Susan used to stand, and there's a roundness to the shoulders. You see how they sort of round this way, and the tension back here is extreme. There's a lot of tension in the hips here. This is literally what's holding her up. You can actually feel that, and the spine is not a happy camper at all right now. So now build the posture back together, and notice that's like a totally different person. And now the presence that you're exuding is very much more in alignment. Now go from here back to your old posture. Yeah. Yeah. And one more time, zip it all up again. Yeah, awesome. And then go from here, morph back into your old posture.
Something more like that.
Yeah. And then zip it back up again. Don't lean back too far. Keep the anchor here. Good. Okay, so you can see that it is possible. And yes, it does take work. But here's the thing. I really encourage people, like I said before, just to make this a playful thing. Let it be a place of wonder and exploration rather than I got to nail this down, I got to nail this down. Dynamic posture is not about nailing it down.
And the more you work with me, the harder it is for me to get in that other posture.
Working on this on your own, I did it and it took me a long, long time to figure it out on my own. Having somebody to feed back to you in real time what's going on and having you make the adjustments is
And I have to
unbelievable.
say, Erin's amazing at knowing when I'm doing it right or not, because to me, I can hardly feel it. But as soon as I'm doing the right thing, Erin gets very happy and goes, yes, that's right. I'm like, how can you know? But she just sees little subtle differences in how my feet are or how my hips are and all that. And apparently you can probably even see it better than I can right now on the camera. But it's been great. Thank you.
Yeah. And people are really, it's starting to show up in the work that she's doing in the world as well. Like she's really playing in a whole other field now. Not field as in, she's still doing the speaker training, but it's like she's addressing a whole other level of clientele, and it's really starting to go viral. So yeah,
There's a quote I like to start. I talk about having a powerful presence, and one of the quotes I like is actually from a rapper named Mos Def, and he says, "My presence speaks volumes before I even say a word."
That's so true. So this is a huge tool for people to use to get into that presence and to start radiating who our essence is without even having to say a word.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.